Conquer Any Fear with Peter Feza. Hello! Today we're going to talk about the big enchilada, if you will. We're going to talk about the biggest obstacle that stands between you and the life of your dreams, whatever that is. If you want to double your income, you want to have a business of your dreams, you want to be a rock star, you want to be a filmmaker, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Because here's where you are. What's the biggest obstacle between where you are and where you want to be? This is what we call in the coaching world the gap. What's that obstacle? Now, if you know me by now and you don't know what I'm about to tell you, shame on you, right? The biggest obstacle that stands between us and the life of our dreams by far is fear. It paralyzes us and it prevents us from taking action even before we start. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to teach you the number one rule when it comes to conquering our fear. I'm going to give you three tips on how to understand that number one rule to conquering fear, so you know it. It's going to empower you so you can take action and you won't let it stop you in the future. So before we start, I'd like to tell you what this number one rule to conquering fear is. Now, here's an example. In our culture, we vilify fear. Here's an example. The only thing that we have to fear is fear itself. Now, who said that? Franklin Delano Roosevelt said that, and he's one of my favorite presidents. I love him. If you haven't seen his documentary series on Netflix, I'd recommend that you watch it. It's awesome. But when we fight fear, what we do is we vilify it. And just like Eckhart Tolle said, he says, whatever we fight, we strengthen, and whatever we resist, persists. So if we fight fear, we can't learn from it. So the number one rule to conquering fear, the very first thing we have to do is we have to understand our fear. Because if we truly want power with it, it must be understood. So this is what the psychologists call the confidence-competence loop. Once you know something, then you develop competency around it. And once you have competency around something, then you develop confidence with it. Here's an example, like driving a car. Remember the first time you were driving a car on a freeway? You were like, holy crap, I think I'm gonna die. There's cars going 60 miles an hour and they're right next to me. Now you're probably driving with one hand, you got your music or your iPhone in the other, or you're eating your donut, whatever it is for you. Or let's just take fitness, for example. Now assume you wanna have an awesome body, that's your dream. You go into the gym and you don't know a whole lot about it, and you start just picking up weights and you're lifting and you're like, man, this sucks. It's starting to hurt. Like, is it supposed to hurt? And then the next day you're super sore. You're like, holy crap, you're sore everywhere. You don't want to get up. It's that sore, your muscles are aching. If you didn't know anything about fitness, then you would think something's wrong. And then you would stop. But since you know something about fitness, you know that it's no pain, no gain. And you know that after a few days, it's going to get better. It's going to heal. And as a matter of fact, you come back, you're stronger, your muscles are a little bit more developed, they're tighter. That's a good thing. That's what happens with fear. When people start taking action towards their dreams, naturally what will happen, because it's just a natural process, you're human, you start to experience fear. If you didn't know anything about it, and I'm going to teach you some things about it, it's going to give you a little bit more confidence. If you didn't know anything about it, you would be stopped. And that's what happens. People aren't versed with their fear. They run from it the first chance they get. I did it for years. And therefore, they continually, it prevents them from taking any kind of action, and they're in this vicious cycle. So the first thing I'm going to tell you about fear is tip number one. Now, when I first came in contact with this tip, I was ferocious. I was so passionate. I was living my life in fear. If you don't know the story, there's this one woman whom I absolutely adored. She got into a car and she drove out of my life forever because I was a freaking coward. I didn't tell her how I really felt about her, so I never saw her again. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to cure my fear. I lived my entire life in fear. I realized that all of my dreams were still in my heart and they were killing me. So I just wanted to find an answer to this thing. That's how Conquer Any Fear first happened. I didn't want to create a program. I just wanted to get out of my own pain. And I'm sure you understand, if you're human, you've experienced your own version of that pain. So I literally, I've been an ex-scientist in me. I was an ex-DNA biologist. My scientist in me wanted to figure this thing out. So I read hundreds of books on the area of fear and transformation, and it came down to this one book. And in this book, it was Dr. Francisco Sotres. He had this article, this experiment on fear extinction, how to get rid of it. I'm like, yes. And it came down to this one page, and this one paragraph, I realized that I had the answer right in front of me. And this is tip number 1. And it came down to this one paragraph, and the paragraph essentially said this. My eyes were wide. Unless you have physical brain damage or you're dead, that is the only time you won't experience fear. To be fearless is an impossibility. When I read that, I was inspired and I was slightly pissed off at the same time. I tried to cure my fear and I tried to get rid of it, and I realized that the only freaking time that we're not going to have fear is when we're dead or we have brain damage, which was a huge revelation for me. I had to rethink things. So the first thing that you need to know about fear is to be fearless is to be dead. So instead of trying to fight it, instead of trying to get rid of it, let's learn from it. So the first thing that we need to do is realize that it's fearless is to be dead. Tip number 2 is to define fear. What is fear? Now let's think about our brain as a biocomputer. It's like a computer, and it's constantly scanning our environments for threats to our safety, right? And when it sees something that it thinks is dangerous, like a bear back in the old days, it sends us the signal of fear via this little tiny structure in the brain called the amygdala. So basically what happens is it sees a potential threat, sends us fear, and what happens? We have an elevated heart rate, our blood pressure starts to increase, our breathing patterns start to alternate, we get the shot of adrenaline in our blood, and it feels like death because for our body, it is. You see, this happiness and peace and joy and harmony thing is a new thing. You know, we're hardwired for survival, and fear was a lifesaver. We see a potential threat like a bear and we get the hell out of there. It's our fight or flight response. But now we live in the 2000s. I live in Seattle. I'm in the middle of the city. And I don't see any bears. Bears aren't here, right? Somebody might pull a knife on you in a city. I mean, I haven't had that happen, right? But it happens. Other than that, that type of fear response isn't warranted. But something happened along the way. Here's a big part of the understanding. I want you to understand this part. It's really important. Yeah, we don't see bears, but our brain is still living in prehistoric times, in caveman days. Now fear is a contemplative thing. It's in our thoughts. So your fear could be fear of the future. Like for me, when I started my business, I'm laying in bed at night and I didn't have a steady income of clients. I didn't know where my money was going to come from. So my brain was constantly sending me these fear signals with shots of adrenaline, elevated heart rate, like 2, 3 in the morning, and it sucked. It was worrying and I couldn't figure out why. But this leads me to tip number 3, the benefit of worrying. You see, worrying has a benefit. It has a function. It's not just this mechanical, hardwired malfunction in your brain. It's actually there for a reason. There's this UCLA researcher. We did this research on the benefit of worrying, and it's amazing. And this is what it says. When I realized that, I was like, holy crap. The worrying is there to inspire action. You know what I mean? It's kind of like our this little guy in our brain is like, wake up! The house is burning down. Get up and freaking do something about it. Get out of here. Get some water. Throw some water on the fire. Now. That's what's happening in our brain. Here's a phenomenon. If you've been worried about something, you just worry incessantly and you just can't stop thinking about it, but then you start to take like a little bit of action towards that worry, whatever that thing is, and the worrying actually just starts going away. For me, I'm constantly rediscovering this. I lecture about this and I talk about this all the time with my clients, but I'm in constant rediscovery mode with this thing. You know what I mean? Where you're worrying about something, I'll be worrying about the business and I'm like, oh God, I'll go to the movies and I'll be eating popcorn, I'll do whatever it takes, I'll clean my house, but I won't do that thing. But then I'm like, Peter, God, the benefit of worrying, buddy, just start taking action on it and I'll do something about it and then it's gone. It has a function. Okay, so let's do a quick review. The number 1 rule to conquering fear is to understand our fear. Once we know it, then we're confident with it. And the number 1 thing we have to understand with our fear is tip number 1, to be fearless is to be dead. The only time we won't have fear is when we are brain damaged or we're physically dead. So let's stop trying to get away from it and let's learn from it. What is fear? It's this physiological response. It's hardwired into our DNA. So we can't get rid of it. It is there. It serves a function. And the third tip that I'm going to give you is that there's a benefit to worrying. The worry is there to inspire action. Action cures fear. Now, this is a part of a trilogy. This is going to be another video, and I'm going to teach you how to be courageous. That's next week, or if this is already video is already shown, just go into a little part of my YouTube page and you'll be able to find it. It's how to be courageous. Then the third part, the third video of this series, is how to conquer your greatest fear so you can triple your income, you can be that rock star, whatever your dream is. This is technology that will change your life forever. This is Peter Fazer reminding you how awesome you are. I'm going to tell you to conquer any of your fears and make your dreams happen now. If you just saw that video and you liked what you saw and you want to get those videos every single week before anybody else, go to my website at conqueranyfear.com. I'm going to give you free tips, tools, and strategies on how to conquer your fear. Plus, you'll get free weekly videos before anybody else gets them. This is Peter Fazer reminding you to conquer any fear and make your dreams happen